Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ramona Speaks the Other Truth. How are you, other truthers out there? I wanted to let you know that I'm no longer broadcasting through the GERN network. I am on my YouTube channel and Facebook Live for now and restreaming. But this is not a live show, but I would love for you to go to my YouTube channel, Ramona Speaks the Other Truth. Hit subscribe, like, and share. I try to bring you different points of views other than what's being bandied around in the mainstream and off stream and other stream and downstream and upstream. And I just want to give you a chance to get a little bit of knowledge on your own so you can make your own decisions about your day-to-day interactions. Sometimes I get lucky and I get to entertain you and have some fun topics. And that is what we have today, because my guest is Mr. Jimy Bleu. And if you are of my generation or have parents of my generation, then you have heard about Jimi Hendrix. I think the world has. And my guest today, I call it channeling, because when he is up on stage, it's like you get lost and you're looking at Jimi Hendrix performing. The spirit, the essence, it's all there. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my guest, Jimy Bleu, and my co-host, Mark Eddy. Hello, you guys.
Hello
Welcome,
there.
welcome. So, Jimy, tell us what prompted you to take up, I'm not going to say cross, but this great journey.
You said you're not going to say what?
Cross.
Okay.
Cross. You know, that old saying,
Yeah.
pick up the cross. No, because you are taking up and continuing a journey that was cut too short. So what led you to that?
Actually, I'm carrying on what the man propagated as far as his teachings, and which included music, but more importantly, especially in regards to this show, he was involved in a spirituality before he died. That most, I would say 98, listen to this percentage, 98% of the people in the spiritual community are unaware that Jimi Hendrix was involved in a spiritual path before he died. I bring this up in the seminars and lectures that I do, and people are like, get out, what? No, get out. But they will acknowledge the other rock stars who were involved in such a deep esoteric spiritual path. But as soon as you say Jimi Hendrix, because the name is so, popular and things like that, they don't take it seriously. So that's more of what my mission is. He expressed it through music, but before this guy died, he was really deep. He was really coming to know, okay, I'm in this position. He was hanging around spiritual people. He was hanging around musicians who were spiritual. So they were like hipping the guy to like, listen, you got a very good opportunity here. And just before he died, he was really coming into that. So that's what I'm really carrying on.
Yeah, I didn't know the man personally. I saw him perform because I'm from the East Bay, and there were always concerts out there. Jefferson Airplane, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and I was in high school and cut in high school to go to go and see. However, I saw the documentary that they did. I thought it was pretty good. And you get that. I did in that documentary towards the end. when I look at it like he was truly awakening inside of himself, what he wanted to do. And I think that the producers or the people behind him, the business people, were trying to thwart that, because they're looking at dollar signs and he's looking at enlightenment. So who do you think was mainly instrumental in him taking upon that journey, that spiritual journey? Who were the influences?
In my research, and when you get into Hendrix, you have to be an avid researcher and documentarian. It's very important. Some people will come at me, well, Jimy said blah, 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 blah. And Jimy's quoted as saying, I'm like, what was the state of mind when he said that? Was he high as a moon? You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean, or whatever. I mean, that was the thing back then, the trip out and just speak unfiltered. So you have to be very discerning with this guy. I would say in my research, there are two people who are responsible for this spiritual journey. The first one would be the musician, jazz musician that most people are not aware of. His name is Sun Ra. Okay, and jazz musicians know who this guy is because everybody who has come in touch with this guy in the jazz world changed their musical style drastically almost overnight. That's how deep this guy was. I can go down the list of people who came across him and just totally. So Jimy met him twice. The second person who's responsible for this is somebody who's considered a wacko, especially in the spiritual community, but he was involved in what is called the Gurdjieff Foundation, which is the George Gurdjieff teachings. And his name is Timothy Leary. And, everybody knows him, like I said, in the political community, but not aware that he was involved in the spiritual work of the Gurdjieff work. A lot of people are not aware of that. And Jimy did an album with him and jammed with him at the Village Gate. You can find that on YouTube. And he also played bass on his album. So he actually produced that album, but he's not given the credit on the album. So he was friendly with Timothy Leary, and Timothy steered him on to the Gurdjieff work. And the person he was working with in the Gurdjieff Foundation is still alive and well today, living in Harlem. So these two people are instrumental in Jimy changing. Now, the verification of that is towards the Cry of Love, Jimy's Cry of Love tour, that album, the Rainbow Bridge stuff. Look up the lyrics. Read the lyrics. Everything was changing. He had a new development. He was going in a new direction musically. And you could see this change. Matter of fact, the famous Band of Gypsies album, which we'll probably talk about, where he had two Black musicians, he did the Fillmore with that. You hear a song called Message of Love. Everything's laid out in that song. The first line to that song is, I'm traveling at the speed of a reborn man. That's it. And he need not say any more. You know what I mean? He was on his way then. You know what I mean? He didn't want to become a monk, meaning, stop everything and go into a monastery, but you could see the deep development. I was blessed to tour with his bass player during that period, Billy Cox. So Billy Cox also, he's like my blood brother, and he verified a lot of things with Jimy going in this direction, as well as the percussion player and friend of Jimy who played with Jimy at Woodstock and other places, Juma Sultan, who was more deeply spiritual, and I think is really responsible for Jimy becoming deeply, not only spiritually, but politically as well.
Jimy, when Jimy was at Woodstock, he called it he called his music electric church music.
Mhm.
Isn't that another example that, you know, he's just saying to however many people were left in the audience, you know, what he was all about. He was defining the what the six people in the band were doing.
Well, he said that from coming out the box in '67. In interviews, he called it, when people say, well, what, he's electric church music. And then he would add to that, to awaken sleeping people. He actually said that when he came out the box. And this was before any kind of, you would think just Jimi Hendrix popping LSD, boom, 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 boom. So there was an awareness then. And like I said, once you start going in that direction, as a person who's really serious about their development, you start what I call strengthening your wish, meaning it leads you to people who will say to you, okay, are you serious about this? This is what you do. And that's what happened with Jimy.
When did you ever get a chance to really rock out with him?
What do you mean rock out with him?
I mean, did you ever get a chance to meet him? To play with him, because you were in Berkeley around that time, weren't you?
No, I was
UC
in
Berkeley.
Performing Arts High School from the
In New
movie
York.
Fame. Yes.
In New York. Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
that was my high school. Basically, I joined, just a little bit of quick history. I joined the Jimi Hendrix fan club in 1968, the end of 1968, just before my birthday in December, with the release of the Electric Ladyland album. I was actually chasing a girl who was a groupie whenever Led Zeppelin and a few other English bands came to town. She was a groupie. So one day she came to school wearing a button that said, "The official Jimi Hendrix fan club want to reprise records." I'll never forget that button. It was like yellowish blue. And so I figured she would always, want to have nothing to do with me, but I figured if to get to her, I would, join this fan club. So I asked her about it and she said, "Oh yeah, well, matter of fact, I'm going tomorrow to Warner Brothers and blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Wow, she's going to Warner Brothers. She must really have some pull." You know what I mean? So I went with her and I joined the fan club. And I wasn't really into Hendrix. I was more still R&B-ish.
Okay.
I was doing the James Brown. I went into performing arts, performing a James Brown tribute. I was doing a James Brown show. I was the James Brown guy in junior high school. We were opening for Kool and the Gang, the Ohio Players, Isley Brothers. We were kids, but it was good. It was a good show. So basically, that's what I was into when I went to performing arts.
Okay.
So I started getting high. I'm being very real with you. I
Right.
started getting high, and one day we went to this. We would all, like 5 or 6 of us, would all get together to get high. And we went to this apartment. Just so happened to be, it was a brother and sister, and their uncle did the photography for Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. Did the, was like that. So he came home unexpectedly and caught us. So we're like, okay, it's all over now. We're gonna really get it, And he yelled at us a little bit, because we were, we had everything spread out, But then he said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And took us in his editing room, opened up the door, and he had the film editing room set up. He showed us the raw footage, unedited, to the Monterey Pop Festival. So I was looking to see Otis Redding because like I said, I was still into the R&B thing. So I couldn't wait to see Otis. I was like, wow. And then all of a sudden I came upon Hendrix, and I was familiar with him, but I wasn't really into him. And I watched the way the guy moved while he was holding the guitar. That was I never seen anybody move like that, their body with the guitar, like that swag. I've never seen that. I've seen countless guitar players. So I looked at that, I guess being high helped. And I said, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that following day, I went to school and I changed my major from trumpet and trombone voice to guitar and voice. That was my major. And that set me on my journey.
Wow. So I know that in your group, you perform with one of the bass players of the Jimi Hendrix experience,
Billy.
Billy Cox.
Yeah, like I said, I was blessed to tour with him. He's not in my group. I toured with him, and
Okay.
we're really good friends. And like I mentioned, also Juma Sultan. When you see Jimmy on the Dick Cavett show, you see Juma at Woodstock with him. Basically, he's like my brother too. And whenever he's in town and Kiss the Sky is playing, we have him come in. He comes in and he's the kind of guy like, you don't even have to pay me, man. Just tell me where to show up, because he digs what we're doing. So yeah.
What? You know, when I think about Jimmy, I wonder, damn, what kind of, you know, how God gifted him with his talent and his presence. And what made him, if you know from your research, what made him choose that route rather than, say, go the soul and R&B, quote unquote, time, you know, that was going on at the time, because in the 60s, it was the Supremes and Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell and stuff. What put him on his path, do you know?
Yeah, well, that's documented, and not just by me. That's actually documented. I think the documentarians leave out one important person, but the first person to really, this important person, I should say first, I should put her first, is a girlfriend of his who saw the potential in him being more than just a soul R&B guitar player backing up R&B acts on the Chitlin circuit. She happened to be the girlfriend of the Rolling Stones guitar player, Keith Richards.
Okay.
So her and Jimmy started messing around. She would actually have Jimmy borrow, quote unquote, borrow Keith Richards' guitar sometimes. I mean, she groomed Hendrix and made him presentable so she can bring rock people down to take him to another level other than a black act. She saw that potential even before Jimmy did. I'm gonna be very honest with you. And thank the Lord, some of that is documented in the movie All by My Side, which Andre Benjamin portrays Hendrix, that was released maybe 4 or 5 years ago. They do get into some of that relationship. Thank the Lord, because nobody else does. And if it wasn't for that woman, I wouldn't be on your show talking about Hendrix. There would be no, in my opinion, no Jimi Hendrix. Maybe somebody would have picked up on him, but not to the effect that he had on the world. It was because of her. Now, let me just give you an example. He'd get ready to go on stage and she'd be like, you ain't wearing that, come here. And she was like, boom, 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 you know, put this on, but that's a female shirt. Put that on, blah, 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 you know, here, put this scarf, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he didn't even really want to sing that much. And she got him into singing more and everything. The reason she felt this is because she was bringing people down to see him when he would play at the Cafe A Go-Go, the Cafe Wa. She was bringing people down. All of the people said, nah, I don't see that. You know what I mean? Nah. Until one guy, she brought down a friend of hers, Chas Chandler, who was the bass player for the Animals and wanted to get him producing. Sat down and saw him, saw the potential that she did, And they both, it was one of those ah moments. And actually, when he took Jimy to England, he said, I'm going to make you, because you're Black, I'm going to make you the biggest, you're going to cross over. And his reason, I got to speak to him, interview him for a couple of hours. He said he was basically, the main thing is that Jimy was doing what everybody in England was trying to do. Jimy was doing naturally. So he knew he can get Jimy out there. And he said the only regret he had was signing a deal with the devil. Now, you had brought this up earlier of Jimy becoming involved with nefarious people. And that was one of Chaz Chandler's, at least what he told me, regrets. This is a guy with no regrets. He said, I had to sign a deal with the devil. You know what I mean? To get a Black guy into, the white stratum, so to speak. He had to sign a deal with the devil. That's not easy to, it's certainly not easy to do back then. It wasn't easy to do,
And that's so weird, because those groups basically stole from the Black musicians.
Well, borrowed, I would say.
Okay.
Everybody stole, musicians steal from each other.
Yeah, but they were not doing any of what they were doing and singing like they were singing before that.
Ooh, you said that, not me. I ain't saying nothing.
Sorry. That's just the truth. And then as they got older and famous and everything, then they started giving credit to who they studied, who they put themselves after and stuff like that, long afterwards. And so yeah, he was in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Well, like I said, thanks to Linda.
Mhm.
Linda kept, matter of fact, he was losing, he was, I'll never get accepted. She was like staying on him. Now keep in mind, she was at the same time going with like one of the biggest rock stars on the planet.
Yeah.
But she saw something in Jimy, and I guess the loving was good. She hung with him and groomed him and got him going. But she believed in him, and sure enough, if it wasn't because of her, matter of fact, Keith Richards was so angry at that time when she found out about her and Jimy, she called her father. Oh, wow. And said, your daughter's in America messing around with a you know what I mean? And he according to the story, I wasn't there, but he went to America, snatched her up and said, you ain't got no damn sense, and took her back, something like that. I don't know the full story, but that's the basic synopsis of it. But yeah.
Wow. Okay, so when did you first start doing what you're doing now? At what point did you say, okay, let's do this? And how did you pick? Is it a group that you guys always, the same people always perform with, or is it different people each time when you go out to do your,
Because you're answering, you're asking a few questions. The first, when I first started, like I said, the introduction of the Electric Ladyland album in 1968 was at November, December. That's when I started doing a Hendrix show. And that's when I said, boom, that's it. Matter of fact, if you go on my website, you can actually see pictures of me from back then. So, of course I was a kid, 16, 17 back then, but we would go see Hendrix and I would try to imitate what I saw. I was at least doing gigs. Right. I was playing for free. I wasn't getting paid mainly.
Right.
But that was me. I was trying to be Jimi Hendrix. And so basically that's it. Now, the second part to your question, when I perform about 5 years ago, I was always performing as the name Voodoo Child. That was the name. It wasn't Jimmy Blue Show. It was always called Voodoo Child, the Jimi Hendrix Show, the only authentic Jimi Hendrix show. And about 5 years ago, I met a producer who was doing a show on Hendrix, and his Jimi Hendrix guy had an accident. So he approached me. I was touring with Billy Cox, and he approached me, and we had a meeting, and I saw some of the videos, and he basically had the costumes, the era equipment, and he wanted to do the same thing I did, which is to present Jimmy as a Broadway play. Like you see Tina, Janis Joplin on Broadway, the Beatles on Broadway. You walk in the theater, boom, you see them from beginning to end. He wanted to do the same thing with Jimmy. I always wanted to do that, but I didn't have the backing.
Right.
So when I met him, it was a marriage made in heaven. His name is Mike Gotch. And since then, that's what we've been doing, is presenting on a mom and pop budget, presenting Hendrix the way he's supposed to be presented, from beginning to end, with different musicians, meaning with the experience, he had 2 white musicians. With the Band of Gypsies, he had 2 black musicians. Woodstock, as Mark mentioned, he had, it was a 6-piece band. We actually have a Puerto Rican percussionist, you know what I mean? We do everything just the way it was back then. We recreate his iconic performances just the way it was. It's a very dangerous show. I'm gonna be very real with you. When you see the show, especially the way it's presented, it's very dangerous to the powers that be.
Why is that?
Because it's unexplainable. People don't fall in line with what they can't explain. How do you explain that? You can't process that. You know what I mean? It's not just a tribute show. There's something else going on here. And when I have the meet and greet, some people actually come up and tell me that. You don't know what it is. They say, there's something deep here. This is crazy.
It's like a spiritual experience. It's like it transcend, you transcend it in time. And, it's like what I've seen. It's
And the show's over, you're
amazing.
different.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Okay.
And there's nobody like that but you now.
They're great shows.
And the kids that are coming up, well, shoot, music hasn't been music for at least 30 years like it was before. Very, very few of it actually makes your hairs rise, actually pulls emotion out of you. And I just wonder, why is that?
Well, there is. You just have to be very discerning. The discernment factor has really shifted. Before, it was just so much of it. And now, today, anybody can open their mouth and be a star. So you have to be a little bit discerning. But since then, there have been Bob Marley, who was a prophet. Simple as that. This guy was a prophet. So much so that they were open when they tried to get rid of this guy. They didn't even try to hide it. I mean, you know what I mean? So basically, there's been Prince, who accomplished much more than Jimmy did as a musical talent. This guy was incredible. We still haven't been able to process what this guy was about. It's going to be a while before people really sit down and say, whoa, you know what I mean? He was very profound. So there's been a few since Jimmy. But you have to be, like I said, discerning,
Yeah, you do. Because Marley is gone. Jimmy is gone. And one of my fallbacks from that time is Santana. And I mean, and Eric Clapton. And those two are the only ones now that I'd be willing to go and brave the crowds to see. And they don't tour anymore.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney, Jimmy, Paul McCartney was a good friend of Jimi Hendrix's, as well as Linda.
As well as who?
Linda McCartney.
Well, he dated Linda. She actually took the pictures of the Electric Ladyland album, but they were close before.
She and Paul.
Yeah, they were very close. Matter of fact, Paul McCartney and John Lennon were Jimmy's best friends. Paul McCartney does not do a show today, to this day, where he doesn't mention, he takes time out from his show, stops everything and mentions his relationship with Jimi Hendrix.
Wow.
Every show. This is how profound this guy affected those two Beatles. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, matter of fact, if you go online, you can Google this. Before Jimmy died, hopefully we get a chance to talk about this, but Jimmy wanted to form a supergroup, or one of the supergroups. He had a few in mind. And one of the supergroups was Miles Davis, who he was close friends with before his death. Tony Williams, who was first Miles' drummer and a very famous jazz drummer, on drums. And he reached out, he sent a letter, a postal, something like a telegram to Paul McCartney to play bass. And Paul didn't get the letter. One of his underhands did, and said, well, Paul's on vacation or something like that. But he reached out to Paul McCartney to play bass. That's how close these guys were. And you can find that letter, you can find that telegram online.
Wow. Wow. Wouldn't that have been something? It's just, he wasn't out there long enough. And that's the real strange part that really affects me, is that how people like him, they're like a blink of an eye, and yet everlasting, timeless, eternal. And there is something, sometimes I sit and I try to figure out, what is it that these people have in common? The ones that have left, were out there and just right at the start, and then they're gone. And yet it's like the residue, the ghosts, the essence, the spirit of them is just still decade after decade after decade, still there. There was something different about them. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really trip on it, because I think of how, and I wonder, is it because they were cut so short that they tend to live on, or is it because they are just otherworldly? I know that sounds crazy, but otherworldly, like sent here for a reason, and once they put that shit in motion, then it was like, okay, it's time for you to go on, move on to the next.
Could be right, yeah. I approach Hendrix as I got older, and for my development, I approach Hendrix's spirituality, which is why I'm so psyched to be on your show, because your show deals with that a lot. That's my concern. Musically, I do what I do. I have my own thing, but I do, of course, the Hendrix show as well. But I'm more into his spirituality. The two paths I mentioned earlier, well, I mentioned one of them, the Gurdjieff work. He was also involved in the ancient Egyptian teachings. And basically that's what I'm vibing on. And it's the same as if I was following Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do technique. Okay, I'm not so much into Bruce Lee. I'm following what he laid down.
Right.
Okay, and it's the same thing with Hendrix. Hendrix started something, I would say a good 9 or 10 months before he left this planet, that was deep. And that's what I'm pretty much vibing on, his spirituality. As a matter of fact, usually I tell the story, or I'm asked about this story. Jimy, when he used to come to the New York City area, he considered himself a New Yorker, even though he was born in Seattle. He was a New Yorker, mainly the Greenwich Village. That was the scene back then. That was his home. So when he would go to Manny's music store, which was on 48th Street in Times Square, performing arts was on 46th Street in Times Square. So there was also where he recorded the record plant, which was also on 46, just further down, I think 10th or something like that. And the scene was, I think, on 44th, or maybe I got it switched around, but 44th Street and further down. The scene was a club where everybody hung out and jammed at the night. It was a very famous little funky club, little cake. You looked like you was going in the belly of the beast when you went down the stairs. So when Jimy would come to that area, he actually would come and sit on the steps of performing arts because it was a hangout. The reason why is because those times he came, he was with Buddy Miles, his drummer. Buddy Miles was dating a girl whose sister went to performing arts. So it was a known hangout for them. So they would come and they would do their little smoking or whatever, and they would come sit on the steps. Us being in the Hendrix fan club, we had the finest Hendrix watch. So somebody would come into it, we'd be like doing history or math or something. Somebody come in the room, Jerry's downstairs. We just get up and leave. Like, where you going? We ain't say nothing. We just run downstairs. Jimmy's downstairs. He would sit on the steps and nobody knew who he was. His hair was short. He didn't look like the Jimi Hendrix from, he just looked like a regular black guy. Maybe he wears a scarf, nice little outfit, but people would just walk by. Maybe somebody would know who he was and look, but, and they would sit there and talk. So one day I was down there and I had a gig at the Hawaiian Kai, which was like a cafe and, blah, 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 blah. And I was so sorry, I ain't getting paid nothing. I'm trying to get his attention. He never knew my name, you know what I mean? But I'm trying to get his attention and I'm like, yep, talking loud. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be playing blah, 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 the Hawaiian, blah, 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 yeah, blah. So I guess he got tired of hearing this little, he looked over at me and he said, oh, really? What are you playing, man? What are you going to be playing? I said, oh, I'll be doing Purple Haze and I'll be doing Foxy Lady and blah, blah, all of his songs. And he, whoa, 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 put his hand out. And he said, when you do you, I'll come and see you play.
Yeah.
That was it. That's one of those moments when when you were a child, because I still had 16 or 17, I was still a child mentality compared to what but you got those moments in life when somebody says something, boom.
Yeah.
So that was it for me. In other words, find your own journey. You know what I mean? And that stuck with me till today. Find out who Jimy Bleu is. Don't try to be me. That's what he was really saying, but the way he said it. And that's pretty much what got me into the teachings.
Wow.
The ancient Egyptian teachings he was involved in because of Sun Ra, he passed on to two of his background singers. They're called, matter of fact, you saw the documentary. You saw them interviewed in the documentary, the Aleem brothers. They're sitting on a park talking about how Jimy goes into Alpha Jerk and all of that and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, those two brothers, because of hooking up with Hendrix, they changed their name to ancient Egyptian names. Nobody asked them why. They went from forgot that Albert and Arthur Allen, that was their real names, to the Alim brothers. Now, Alim is an Arabic name, but their first names, Taharka, that's an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, and Tundra, these are ancient Egyptian names. Nobody who interviewed these guys sat down and said, gee, what? Those are interesting names. What? Nobody did that. This is what I'm saying. So basically he passed, and I happened to interview, I know both those guys, well, one of them still alive, Taharka, we're friends. And I happened to interview these guys and I know them. And basically they told me the whole story. Jimy turned them on to the teachings, and he actually gave them foundational money to start their own record label. And just to tell you how deep Hendrix is, he said, I'll give you the money to start this, but you have to call the label Nia Records. You know what Nia stands for?
No.
It's one of the principles of Kwanzaa.
Oh, wow.
Now, how this guy know? You see what I'm saying? Nobody, this
Knew
is what I'm
how
saying.
deep he.
This is exactly what I'm saying, that he's been interviewed countless times, but the right questions wasn't asked pertaining to spirituality. And you don't hear him talked about on spiritual programs. I've been on quite a few spiritual programs that had some of the people that's been on your show, some of the people that's been on the shows that Mark was affiliated with. I've been on certain of their shows, and nobody even thinks of Jimi Hendrix in this spiritual light. So my lectures on Hendrix are called American Guru, because that's what he was. You know what I mean? He was a quote unquote guru, and he actually is quoted when he was in the right frame of mind, I always say, of wanting to get a spiritual community together. That's what that was his main aim.
Like mine, yeah. Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Ever since those days, I mean, that's always been in the back of my mind. Always seeking, looking for home. You know.
I like that. I like that.
And that's why, you know, I didn't, because it was so quick and I was young and raised by very strict parents. So, you know, what little chances that I did have to get out there and just live and enjoy were few until I, of course, left home. But I was I kept things meant, I looked at them different. You know, it was more than a surface thing, because if it touched me, then I knew something. You know, when a person or an entity or a book or a song touches you to the depths of your soul, there's something going on. And wow.
Deep, right?
Yeah,
Deep.
yeah, it is, because everything is so surface and superficial. So when they see him perform, you know, everybody's high and everything, and they're, you know, jamming out to the music, but they're not really, not all of them, but that music is saying something, is speaking, is moving, is affecting, if you were in the right mind to receive it.
Well, that's the key, what you just said, because as you know, you and Mark being, you know, definitely working on yourselves to development, esotericism is not for everybody.
Right.
It's for the few. Jimy wanted to use the platform he was the #1 rock star before he died, the highest paid rock star before he died. And he wanted to use that platform to attract the few. You know what I mean? This is where he was going. So his music was constantly changing to go in that direction. When you hear the stuff that he did before he died, I can't even listen to it because I know from being with Billy, that stuff was constantly changing. He was on the phone with Billy before he died in England a lot, saying, hey, man, so, we're going to change that. We're going to go to the verse here and I'm going to add this. And it was constantly changing. It wasn't going to sound like that. When he died, what they did was go into the vaults and say, okay, we got this. A lot of it was jams or just ideas and put it out. So I can't even listen to that stuff. Basically, too, you mentioned Carlos Santana.
I love him.
Okay, now, this is something you probably didn't know. And this is very important in his development because, as you know, he's spiritual. You know who Alice Coltrane is?
Yes.
Okay. Alice Coltrane, do you know what she is or what she was?
As far as in a spiritual aspect?
Yes.
No.
Alice Coltrane formed ashram. She got into Hinduism, formed an ashram in California. And she was considered a guru. And her ashram is still, she died, but her ashram is still going strong in California. And she spoke at my high school, and she spoke when I went to Berkeley, but she spoke at my high school, and she basically, just how deep she was, she sat at the piano and she just sat there. So people were like, you know, we were kids, like I'm saying, and people are like, go ahead, play something. You know, ain't nobody said that, but like, we don't play.
Looking around.
You know, yeah, exactly. Like, what's going on? She sat there and she said, I'm going to ask you to feel your breath. Take a deep breath in and out. Will everybody do that for me, please? So we did that. And then she played. And when she finished playing, she did a Q&A. And somebody asked her, was she familiar with the new thing that was happening with rock music, blah, blah, blah. She says, I reached out to Jimi Hendrix to collaborate with him and was getting the runaround from his management. I called Miles Davis, my good friend, and he gave me a personal number to reach Jimi. I called and spoke to this girl who said she would give Jimi the message. I haven't heard from him to this day. So I'm now collaborating with Carlos Santana. She did an album with Carlos. And you need to look that album up because she affected Carlos so much that the guy changed his name to a Hindu name. He wasn't calling himself Carlos Santana, he was calling himself David Dip. That's because of Alice Coltrane. That's how deep this woman was. So when people come to me and say, you into John Coltrane, I'm like, I'm more into Alice Coltrane, tell you the truth. And she got what she got, she claims, from John, but what she accomplished spiritually went way beyond, to me, what John was doing.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the Illuminations CD?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and look at some of the songs that, you know, she did, ancient Egyptian titles, things like that. This woman was deep. So what do, you know, when I do my lectures, I'm like, wait a minute. First of all, just let me give you a rundown here who this guy was tight with. Miles Davis, okay, Larry Coryell, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, Quincy Jones, Hugh Masekela. You don't be around these guys and ain't being about nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's one other, and I can't, his name evades me. But he was like out of Berkeley. Very different type of music. I'll think of it.
Yeah, well, these were Jimi's, what I call friends, people who set Jimi straight. And like I say, being around, seeing these jazz musicians and seeing them perform and talking to some of them, you better have something upstairs to waste their time. You know what I mean? Because these people are masters Miles Davis and Jimi Hendrix are very close. Are you familiar with the album Bitches Brew?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Both Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone were supposed to be on that album, because at the same time that Jimmy was hanging with Miles, Sly Stone was hanging with Miles. Now imagine
Wow.
these three going out and hanging out. Just close your eyes and visualize these three guys hanging out. So the reason, I don't know why Sly wasn't included on the album. I'm not sure, but I do know why Jimmy wasn't on that album, and that's because Miles' wife, Betty Davis, introduced Miles to Jimmy and was messing with Jimi Hendrix. Now, she denies it, or she won't even talk about it. I'm telling you how the scene was back then. It's nothing negative. That's
Right.
just the way it was.
Yeah.
You know, people hanging out and, oh, come here, girl, boom, 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 and,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. That's, there's nothing bad about it. But so Miles writes about this in his bio, and that's why he pulled Hendrix off the plans of doing that album and got John McLaughlin instead, who's another spiritual genius. So that was what was pervading the atmosphere back then, that spirituality, even though these people were involved in drugs.
And it seems like they were quiet. Well, maybe it was because perhaps the Black community wouldn't receive it well.
Who
being
felt?
from,
What do you mean?
because they never emphasized that. But if you listen to each one of their music, that it's in there. But they weren't so vocal about their spirituality.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Black community. You can't mention spirituality today to Black community unless you're talking. You're funny. Unless you're talking Islam, Christianity, maybe because of Tina Turner Buddhism. You mention anything else, Black folk will look at you like, okay, he's into that weird, voodoo stuff.
And that was my nickname. Weird. You're weird.
Yeah, man.
You're unique.
Black community is very conservative with spirituality. Very conservative.
And I don't understand that, because even in their Christian church, even in the music that they play, even in their day-to-day life, all the way back, there's been a little something else going on. And they know it, and they're silent about it, because I guess they feel that stigma that if you ain't talking about Jesus, you're talking about the devil.
Yeah.
And yet it was that spirituality and strength that helped them survive for 300 years. And after,
Well,
that
even
is so deep rooted. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's, I would say from my research, it's not Christianity.
No,
because and I always talk about this.
Christianity is the youngest religion there is. Well, no, Islam is. It came after that.
It's how great Africa was.
Yeah.
Which is one of the main reasons why this has been held down. And thank goodness now, not there's been Black scholars been saying this for decades, but now a lot of white scholars are saying, wait a minute.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
they're like, oh, no. So basically, somebody should do a movie about this, which they won't. Here's what happened. You had the Black indigenous African masters back in the day. And I here's how the movie would go. one day, guy walks into his superior's office. I know, right? Picture, picture this. He walks into his superior's office and he says, I've been hearing about this. People been taken captive and blah, blah, blah. I had a vision that it's going to come here to Africa. And I guess they believed him. And they said, so what do we do? Wow. I mean, this thing is traveling all over the globe. What do we do? And they said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll cloak our teachings to the captives. That's what they did. So when they came over here, and this is why I always say Americans have, it's quite different from any other captives, African captives on the planet, because what they did here was they cloaked it in the music and the dance. So in my lectures, when I say that's the most important aspect of Black culture and why we survived the genocide that's still ongoing with us, is because our music and our dance, which is chumped off today as just entertainment. But those people put the esoteric
dance circles.
Yeah, I mean, everything.
That shouting in church, there's a reason for that.
Yes.
It goes back. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, then when they came here and did it, the slave master said, don't do that.
Yep.
We'll kill some of the people. So they had to disguise it. And that's where you get Christianity. Instead of, you get the spiritualism, they would see what the whites were doing in church, and they would mimic that, but they would still keep that esoteric nature in that, the pentatonic scale. Basically, they found that in King Tut's trumpet.
Oh my God.
This tune, the pentatonic scale. That goes way back. And that's the foundation of the Gurdjieff teachings, the law of seven. So that goes way back in Africa. So that's, but picture that as a movie,
Yeah. Well, I see the movie. I'm living in the movie. But yeah, and I think that's why, when they talk about the ancestors talk to you, I do think I'm still studying it and doing my observations, but I look at the past musicians that have been stars, so quick, boom, all of them, and that certain thing that all of them have in common, and how it is almost like a religion where it lasts long after they're gone, and the effects of it. And the more that you take their music, which is like an onion, and you start peeling back those layers. When they say music is the most powerful thing as far as healing and your inner being, there's truth to it because it's sound. And there's a certain vibration to that sound. And I'd like to do a test on the vibrations. If you know power versus force, okay. So that certain songs have a low vibration, other songs have a high vibration that can affect people, like certain music can make you turn into a homicidal maniac listening to it. And then there's others that can lift you up and outside of yourself. And I don't know if it's because of the instrument or the person playing the instrument, or the marriage of the two. But it lifts something inside of you. And if it doesn't, you need to turn away from it. That's just my opinion,
Well, Ramona, to
I know
follow up,
she's crazy.
but no, to follow up with what you were just talking about with the vibration, you know, Jimy brought to my attention the importance of the introduction to the Rainbow Bridge concert, and that's the spoken introduction really does seem to set up this legacy of Jimy's that lives on for over 50 years now.
Wow, yeah.
Jimy, can you tell us a little bit about the importance that the announcer says about Jimy?
The introduction.
Yeah, actually that Rainbow Bridge concert is considered a joke today by most. And the producer, the person who put it on, Chuck Ween, is considered a clown. And I'm more into his vision, especially after speaking to Chaz Chandler, that he had for that concert, which is bringing together people of different races and ethnicities for a spiritual gathering. Okay, now that's not done today. You know what I mean? Or let me say, it's very rarely done today. Mixing races is considered a no-no still today, especially now with the polarization in the United States. It's really gotten crazy. So that's what Chuck wanted to do. He gets up on stage and he, like I said too, of course, everybody's high and, blah, 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 blah. And he says, to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact words, but he says, so if everybody can just put this, the minds together, so Jimy can take that and lead us over the Rainbow Bridge. So Jimy was specifically chosen for that aim. And Jimy was the last minute decision because of his manager to even be involved in that, to sell the movie, actually. So, but look what happened. That's what when I think of Rainbow Bridge, matter of fact, Jimy hated that concert. And in between his sets, he went into a teepee, Native American teepee. And the shirt that he's wearing at that concert was made by a Hopi, quote, I hate to use this term, medicine man, but it was made by a Hopi,
shaman.
Yeah, that's a better word, shaman. And basically, it was a very spiritual thing, even though he hated his playing on it. You couldn't even bring that up around him. So, but I'm more into the aim of that because I think that's very important. And that's what I'm about, is hooking up with people of various ethnicity. I don't want it all black. I don't want it all white.
That's
Asian.
Right. That's right.
I need to be around people who are different ethnicities that I can
right.
vibe from.
And here's the thing. There was a time when that was really kind of normal.
Yes.
In ancient times.
Yes.
And there was no such thing as race then. It was, if you were Egyptian or Roman or something like that, that's what they looked at. But there was a mixture. That's why it's such a mixture, melting pot. It's I think the trend is to get away from that, has been for the last 500 years since the discovery of the United States. That's when all of that began.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to be real. That's when it began. Actually, in 1698, I believe, is when they coined the term white in this country. and then started making the laws against it in this country. And then it spread like any other cancer. So, I mean, I'm just being real. That's exactly what happened, because there were indentured people from all over that wanted to come to this land of milk and honey. And when they got here, they were able to buy their way free. And then and they would run for office. I mean, it's a whole history in itself. The what happened, what transpired, and they weren't making money. And so, when people started running for office and being elected, they had to put a stop to it. And that's when it began. And then you were no longer able to be an indentured. They didn't want that because people were losing money. They worked, paid off their debt, and went on and became bosses or whatever themselves. That is the early history of these colonization of the United States. And so, having said that, I myself, I myself, do not want a world of the same, because it is the contribution of every group, of every spiritual intelligence that we receive from these different groups, that I think will be what we will all be about in the end, if that's making sense to you.
Oh, yeah. Well, the history you brought up, I failed that in school. I'm basically, I'm in the history, but I'm into very ancient history. And when
Oh
it
yeah.
came up to, the colonization, I was like, I failed that completely. You mentioned before music. We today are infants
Mm-hmm.
to the true esoteric significance of music.
Mm.
When we go to places like, let's take Egypt, for example, the Saqqara complex, where it's said it's supposed to be the first pyramid, which isn't the first pyramid, Saqqara pyramid, that whole complex attributed to King Joseph, that's a whole sound complex for sound experiments. Meaning there's a place there, and this has been demonstrated not only by Stephen Miller, but a few other scholars, of where a person would go and lay down and a chant would diagnose the person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? This is how deep it was. The structure's still there. When you go into the greatest structure we have on this planet found to date. Now, maybe tomorrow somebody will dig and find something else, but the greatest structure that man has achieved to this date, what we call today the Great Pyramid of Khufu. No other structure on the planet is built that precise, and they're still finding out things about this almost every day that is just mind-boggling, that scholars won't even talk about because it's science fictional. They don't want to talk about it, the measurements and everything.
That's right.
One thing that's obvious has been done by Tom Daly, Christopher Dunn, people like that. When you go into the King's Chamber, it's set up to an F-sharp chord. The chambers in that pyramid are set up to sound. So even today, you can go on YouTube and you can find what I just said, and you can see people actually chanting in the chambers. But you have to be very careful. Who is chanting?
Yeah.
Does that person have vocal technique? Is that a trained technique, or just somebody going in? Even then, you can go in and do that and get something from it. But imagine somebody who's actually trained to receive the vibration that's there, that's still there in its ruin. That structure's ruined. It's not vibrating. Christopher Dunn brings this out. It's not even nowhere near set up the way it was set up. It's in ruins, and still
There.
it's there. The vibration is still there. That's
There.
when you go to Egypt, you go into these temples, you walk on alabaster floors and things like that. That's for sound.
Yeah.
These things were built on sound, not just mathematics, but sound. It's very important.
And in India too, you know?
Oh, all over the planet. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Because I walked into a temple, a Buddhist temple, while they were doing the prayers.
Mm.
When you walked in, all you heard was but they were actually chanting words.
Mhm.
But the coming together of those words produced that sound. Because at first I thought, wow, you know, but then when I sat down and got the prayer book out, I realized that everybody was actually saying the prayers. But when you stand back, you don't hear those words separately. You don't hear the words. You hear the vibration of those words, which was
Deep. Deep.
you know, when you experience things like that, a lot of the bullshit that's going on around or that you encounter every day, you recognize it for what it is. There is just so much other things that our minds should be concentrating on
Oh, yeah.
to help us, to lift us, and we miss it. We miss it.
Yeah. Well, it has to be the focus of your life is self-development. And how many people you know in your life are seriously involved in that endeavor? You know, this is a serious undertaking that takes up every bit of your life. And
Right.
imagine if you have children or if you have a spouse or somebody who's not involved in that, or
Yeah.
you have other priorities. That it, you know, I'm not saying don't have those other priorities, but what I'm saying, it takes away from that. So you have to find a way to juggle that.
Well, that's why they went to the mountaintop
Hmm.
and they went into the desert because, you know, like you said earlier, it's not for everyone. And eventually we have to make that decision of how strong the pull is to follow that beat.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
It's
It
very hard.
really is hard.
One of the features of the Gurdjieff work is that we don't go to a mountaintop. We don't go to a monastery. We do it, the work that is done there at those places in our daily life. For instance, I'm sitting here talking to you. There's something I'm doing as I talk to you and Mark that I'm trying to maintain and to keep as I talk to you. It's hard, I slip, but I come back. This is called inner work. And this is what the Gurdjieff work, as well as the teachings of the ancient Egyptian temple, which wasn't open to the masses. It was only open to the few. And this is what the work, the people involved in. Matter of fact, in ancient Egypt, you went in at the age of 6 or 7, and you didn't consider yourself a man or come out until you were like 47 or 46 or something. You were involved in there. And so one of the greatest things that has happened with development of man is that through those two paths, and I'm sure there are other paths as well that offer this, you're able to do that in your daily routine today, in today's modern world. You don't have to retreat somewhere like that. And I think that's one of the greatest discoveries. Matter of fact, we're finding out that the ancient world was involved. I focus on Egypt, but I'm sure, like you said, India and other places. We're finding out these people were highly
Aborigines.
advanced. They went into a different direction technology-wise, meaning in ancient Egypt, they were more involved in two things that we know today nothing about. The first thing is tweaking the human machine for higher development. Okay, we basically, we mess around with, but we don't know. They knew exactly how to do this, the potential of the human machine for higher development. The second thing, we certainly don't know about it. We can guess all we want, is mapping out and actually detailing what happens to you when you die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just, it was like an exact science, meaning, okay, you're going to go here and you're going to meet this and you got to do this and you got to do this. If you don't do this, blah, 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 blah. It's like, now, wait a minute. We know that those two things I just mentioned worked. Why do we know this? I'm speaking specifically of ancient Egypt, because the culture lasted over 3,000 years with minor interruptions. You don't last in a culture based on those foundations I just mentioned and not have it together.
Right.
It's going to fall apart.
Right.
You know what I mean? That spirituality has to be concrete, foundational for that thing to last.
Yeah. And I think they had a secret, and that secret was they were there when the divine was here.
Well, like I said, that's speculative, and yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I
mean,
vibe to it, but sure, but
but
I'm talking.
How else could it have been so tight?
Maybe if there were other options. What I'm saying is, what can we verify? Because if you say what you said to certain people sitting around in a circle, somebody look at you and say, yeah, prove it to me. And we couldn't. What I'm saying is stuff that we can verify. Ain't nobody got to think about. It's basically those two things I mentioned. First of all, they built things that we can't build today. How do I know this? Because you can go on YouTube and
And
see
they're
this.
trying to do it.
There's scholars who go over there and say, I don't know how they did this. We can't do this today with what we have. How did they? We can't do that. And they actually say that. Like I said, there's Carmen Voltaire documents this in her documentary. There's countless documentaries where they have, here, come to Egypt with me. Tell me how they did this. I don't know. I couldn't do this today. I couldn't undertake this task today. And also, as far as the death thing, we're finding, what do we find when we open the tomb? We find the guy, and this is ancient Egypt. So I'm involved in pre-dynastic Egypt. That's that's where I vibe from. By the time it went to dynastic Egypt, I think there's a falling away, even though it lasted 3,000 years. I think it's falling away. I think a lot of those things were done way before dynastic Egypt came on the scene. But even let's since we're talking about that, that's when we opened up these tombs, when we these people had go into the pyramid text. Look at what they're writing about. That's an exact science. That's not, oh, I wish to, when I die, I wish to, this is like exact science from what we can read. We can only read the outer shell, like you said, an onion. We don't know how to peel into the onion of these what we call hieroglyphics. You know, we don't know how to do that. We're just going by what we can get a gist of, and it's deep.
Yeah, and I think what is missing is the spirituality.
Yes.
That extra, that I don't have the words to describe it, but
well, what is missing where? When you say missing, where?
Why we can't do a lot of the things that they did back then today.
Yes.
And then when you look at this country, it hasn't even been 500 years, and they're about on the brink. They're not going to last. They're not going to last like this another another 100.
Well, you have to wonder how much of that information did we lose in the fire at Alexandria?
We didn't lose, when people bring that up, it was a library, like many of the libraries that were spread out across Egypt. And the stuff that I just mentioned to you, it has to be orally transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be written down in a scroll and put in the library. Somebody say, oh, I want to blah, 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 blah. Let me go read how to do that. One of the reasons why it has to be orally transmitted is because as I'm transmitting it to you, I have to be present. You have to be present. Then something higher happens.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons. And I found this out studying Tai Chi with my Sifu. She knows, my Sifu knows when I'm not there, I'm not present. And so sometimes she used to slap me. Thank the Lord she don't do that anymore. But when I move and I'm not there, she lets me know we ain't going further. And I have to be present. And that's how you transmit the esoteric knowledge that I'm talking about transmitting. So
Because
the library, I mean, a lot was lost, sure, but not the main stuff that works.
Because I think also too is because it was not only verbal, but it was practice.
Yes.
And it was learned. It was act. It was doing. It was a state of being. And you can't write that down.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. So it is what it is. So at what point do you think? Here's something. Was there any idea or notification that Jimy had that he was at the end?
Oh yeah, he knew he was a walking dead man, a dead man walking. Sure, he knew it was a matter of time. Look what was happening around that time. Everybody around him was being taken out. He knew it was just a matter of time. Matter of fact, he supported sustainable communities. One of them I know, and I heard there was others. One of them I know about, and he kept these completely hidden. He supported other musicians. He didn't want them in his, what he called his dirt, his mess. He knew it was a matter of time. He was very dangerous, what he was doing, and he knew that. And like I said, he was hanging around people who were informing him and helping him. These were deep people. These were
giving them
knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying, hey man, this is how, it's how you navigate yourself through this. But you are in some, oof. He's a very dangerous man. I always say back then, the two most important people of that era was Muhammad Ali and Jimi Hendrix, and Jimi Hendrix is left out the equation. You know what I mean? Muhammad Ali at least had somebody on his back. He had his back covered with the Nation of Islam. Very smart move. Jimmy had nobody. You know what I mean? And here he tramping around with, like 5, 6, 3 or 4 white women, like Jack Johnson.
During Jim Crow.
Yes, you know what I mean? He's like a musical Jack Johnson. It was like, it's like, it's just a matter of time, man.
Yeah.
But what he accomplished, he knew. But what he accomplished and where he was going, who knows? He might have done enough to go to the next level. Well, I don't know his personal work. His personal inner work. I don't know. He might have done enough because I know he just happened to come upon the teachings a good 8-9 months before his death. I mean, seriously involved. Now, who could he talk? Sometimes people say, well, gee, how can you verify this with me? And usually Juma is the only one, and Juma knows about this. So he's the only one me and him talk about this. But who's he going to talk about this to? Who's he going to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who's not working on themselves? Do you do that today? I know I don't. If I'm meet somebody, even in my family, if they're not working on themselves, I'm not going to have the conversation we're having here on this show with them. It's too deep.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm better than anybody, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So that's the way you got to look at Hendrix. Who was he around when he said what he? Some people, well, Jimy said, blah blah. Yeah, who was he around? What was his state of mind? Was he blasted out of his head high? You're like, these are the things you have to be. When I said you have to be discerning with Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
was his relationship with Janis Joplin?
Today we call it buddies.
Okay. Okay, so it wasn't anything deeper than that.
No, how can it be? They were partying, you know. No.
But even in the middle of your partying, like people used to tell me, you sure know how to up somebody's high. Because I would start talking like we're talking now, and they say, "Shut up."
I don't think it was that deep with them two. Did you see the movie The Rose? Did you see that movie?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Bette Midler. Oh man, she endeared my heart with that movie. That was supposed to be the Janis Joplin story.
Right.
So basically, just think of that with Hendrix. There's a famous photo of Jimy. You can Google this photo of Jimy behind the stage. I think it's at the New York City World's Fair, and him and Janis are backstage, and you can't really see Janis's face, but you see Jimy. He used to love taking 8mm video. He was a videographer, like he was mad about it, right? So he carried a camera mostly everywhere he go. He always taking pictures, right? And he's taking pictures of Janis, and all you see is her legs spread. Now I ain't gotta tell you what the rest. You don't even see her head. And yeah, and that's a famous photo, man. I mean, plus Google Jimi Hendrix's girlfriends, and you'd be surprised at some of the names that pop up. These are some very famous people he was involved
I wouldn't
with.
be surprised.
But it was, it's all in fun. That was the thing back then, that was the vibe.
Yeah, and Jimy, speaking of fun things, you have an event coming up next week, is that right?
Yes, we'll be at the Cutting Room. Kiss the Sky will be at the Cutting Room in Manhattan. It's on 32nd Street in Manhattan. We're doing the annual Jimi Hendrix birthday. It's the 79th birthday. And we do it every year. We used to do it at the Cafe War. We used to do it at BB King's. So this year we'll be at the Cutting Room. We'll be doing the Experience Show, the Band of Gypsy show. We're supposed to have a couple of special guests come up with us as well.
What about that event in California? When do they have a date?
No, that was rescheduled. Yeah, that was definitely rescheduled.
Okay, but that sounds like a hell of a thing to be a part of. Oh my God.
What's that?
That event in LA?
Yeah, it's a lot going on. It's I'm just glad that there's still an interest in Hendrix like it is, other than people going to see the Experience Hendrix show, which is run by the estate. And I'm not saying that's invalid. I'm saying go see that. But if you're really into Hendrix, you need to come see Kiss the Sky. People come to see this show, they want to see how Jimy did it. You know what I mean?
Or to be reminded how he did it.
Basically, a lot of people don't know. And they it needs to be done in an in-your-face manner, no gimmick, no pretending you playing thing, you know what I mean? And they really have to see what was going on. Jimy he reinvented the way the electric guitar was approached. He treated it as a sound machine instrument. today we call it guitar synthesizer. Before it was guitar synthesizer, that's what he was doing with the guitar. He reinvented the way the guitar was approached. What turned me on to him was the way he used his body to manipulate sound. And matter of fact, people used to get jealous of him doing that. Say, man, you don't need to be moving around like a clown. So he started to, you know, check in with that. Yeah, I don't want to be a clown no more. I ain't going to move around. Until he spoke to Sun Ra again, and before his death. And Sun Ra said, what are you, crazy? What better way to manipulate sound than with your body, the way you do it with your body? So before Jimy died, like at Berkeley, the Berkeley concert and things like that, we find him getting back into the stage tricks that he used, that he said he wasn't going to do anymore. That's because he's speaking with Sun Ra.
Wow.
Oh, and one thing I also want to mention too before I leave is he had this play, this film script that he submitted to Warner Brothers Records called Black Gold. Black Gold was a character that we would call today Indiana Jones. He travels the world and gets into these, discovering ancient things and has an adventure and people chasing him. He wrote a whole script on that. He didn't finish the script, but he submitted what he had to Warner Brothers. Right? He really wanted to do a film based on that character, who we call Black Gold. And the film, some of the script is resurfaced today. You can find it on, you can Google it and find it on the net.
Wow. Wouldn't that
Deep, right?
Yes. Yes. They need to. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm very seldom left speechless, but this is so deep. And when you look back at the amazing uniqueness and all-encompassing depth that this man had at such a young age. We're not talking about no old guy like me. We're talking young. And all of that was rolled up and in one body. And I'm thankful that I at least got to see him perform and hear his music. I looked at that time itself was, there will never ever be another that. And I write all the time, every year in my contemplations and stuff, that I am, and people of my age are so fortunate, because I think even though there was so much going on, so much rebirthing, coming together, exploration, opening up, loving. And there will never, ever be another time like that.
I don't see
it. It won't. They destroyed what was there. And when I say they, the powers that be, they destroyed it because they saw what was happening. It was a movement. And people were coming together.
Yeah, that's
as
a big
one.
no-no. That's a big no-no. They don't like that.
No,
Don't bring people together.
no, don't stir them up. Don't open their eyes, because we'll close yours. And basically that's what they did.
That's what they did. With Jimy, it was different. They didn't have to do nothing. He slipped himself, according to the regular story. Some people say he was killed or what, but he's gone.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when people, usually I take the Q&As at my lecture. People Well, what do you think about Jimmy's death? I'm like, next question. He's gone.
He's gone. He's
You know what I
gone.
mean? He's gone. Now, how did he affect you? Is what I want to hear from you. You
Now
know
he
what I
may
mean?
be back, and we'll have to see. I'll know it when I see it, if it's him.
Yeah, but if he comes back, why would he want to do that? When you was in grade school, and you took a test or whatever, and it was time to go to the next class, did you want to go back to the class you was at? You took the
No.
test to pass.
Yeah.
That's why I'm not into reincarnation.
Well, I think we'll have to discuss that one day, because I'll prove it to you.
Well,
But
listen, I'm not saying what you're doing isn't valid. It
no,
works for you.
I'm just
you know.
saying that they say Jesus is reincarnation. Even in the Bible, they refer to him as being someone else coming back. And then I look at the spiritual religious leaders, as they evolved, and they almost always seem like it's the same person, but just in a different body, in a different part of the world, but teaching the same thing.
It reminds me of that Twilight Zone episode where the bum finds the shoes. And he becomes that person.
Oh yeah.
And then he dies, and somebody
And somebody else comes along and picks up those
that's
shoes.
my favorite.
Yes.
Basically, what the ancients offered with the teachings is two options that I found. Maybe there's other ones. The first option is reincarnation, and you can find this in the Indian teachings, the African teaching.
Right.
You find this all over.
Right.
Meaning, you work through successive lives to reach a certain spiritual level.
Right.
What the temple teachings and what I was saying about Gurdjieff's work on the ancient Egyptian temple teachings offer to the few, what we call the temple elite, is spiritual development in this life.
Yeah.
Here now, so you don't come back. You have to keep coming back. You do the work here, and you can move on to your next class. Your
Right.
I call it, musicians call it the next gig, and that's what Jimy did. He went on to his next gig.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that.
Well,
Until I
it
see
has
him.
specific.
Until I see him, and then I'm gonna say, Jimy.
Well, no, the teachings I'm talking about too, he was involved in. It had specific names. The reincarnation path was called the path of Asaru, or we call known as Osiris,
Yeah.
the path of successful lives. And the other path of reaching a high level in this life was called the path of Heru, or Horus. Okay, so they had specific. Now, as I said, the science was exact. We just don't know it, don't know about it. So we consider it, it's just fables or myth. They made it up and stuff, like that.
Yeah, but I think they were taught during that time. It was an entirely different world at that time.
Yes.
And there was a lot of interaction and stuff like that. They knew things that we will never know. I don't know why it's not shown to us. I have my ideas, but I think the ancient people, because they were so young as far as a species, with the divine essence or whatever, they were able to interact with them. I mean, as a child, by the time I was 6, I had read all mythology books in the little library in
By the time you
Oakland.
were 6, you said? 6?
By the time I was 6, I could read when I was 3.
Wow.
I was drawn. You could ask me, this 6-year-old, any question about Egyptian, Greek, Roman mythology, some African, what little there was available. And I could answer, I can tell you who the people were because they had become real to me. And it's like, I think as we get older, I think when we're born into this world, we have a certain knowledge. Because I can remember how I thought at 18 months, at 3 years old. I can tell you things that happen that people say, oh, they're just kids. They don't, you cannot articulate, but you are a spirit-filled being that knows no age.
Mhm.
That spirit inside of you, when you pass through that canal, it awakens to this world. And it is ageless. It's getting used to navigating this world. But you know things. And as we grow, and as people teach us to use our voices more, to train us to whatever, we lose a lot of the stuff that we brought with us. I really, I used to test it. And I try to say this to people always when I ask, never underestimate the intelligence of a child, what they see and how they grasp. They just can't articulate. They may not understand. I used to have to get dictionaries to know what certain things were and still couldn't really grasp adult things. And the esoteric, metaphysical aspect of that, you come in with certain knowledge that is erased the older you get, inundated with this world is. I heard Moonlight Sonata when I was 4. I loved it. I recognized it. And I sat at the piano. I didn't play it perfectly, but I played it enough that people knew what I was playing.
Wow.
And then life happens and it starts interfering. And I think Jimi Hendrix, the writers, the philosophers that seemed to be before their time went through similar things. And the trauma or whatever that they encountered is what I think what helped cut their life short and their choices.
Mhm.
And so having said that, Jimi Hendrix, I miss you. And I wish you were an old man. Because I'd love to know what he'd be doing, what he'd be saying, you know, if he got to even live like Prince or Michael.
Hmm.
So, Mark, do you have any questions for our guests? Anything we haven't covered?
Since we've spoken about, mixing of backgrounds, how is it that Narissa put me to work and I ended up being a roadie for you for a night?
And I'm very appreciative of that. You
Thank
really gave a
you.
helping hand.
I am so jealous. My God.
But when you do your show next week, is are
Can I
Ted
be a
and Eric
roadie?
gonna be there as well?
Say that again?
Are Ted and Eric going to be part of the show?
Well, Ted, yes. Eric is on vacation, so we have another bass player. But Ted
Okay.
is my Mitch Mitchell.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, he's a drum scholar. So, matter of fact, when I've been with Ted for over 20 years, so when I got the chance to hook up with Mike Gotch and formulate Kiss the Sky, I said I'm bringing my Mitch, and Mike was like, "Well, I got a Mitch." I said, "No, no, no, I'm bringing my Mitch." As simple as that. So thank goodness Mike agreed, and heard Ted, and yeah, Ted is his name is Ted Edwards from Long Island. He's a drum scholar. Uh, he knows not only a lot about drums, he studied from masters, but he really studied Mitch Mitchell. Sometimes I brought him on my lectures to talk about Mitch. Sure.
Yeah, and do you have anyone else joining the show next week?
Well, I like I said, I'm doing the experience show, but I'm also bringing two brothers up on stage to do the Band of Gypsies. Yeah, one of the bass player who plays the Billy Cox role. His name is Moby, and he's basically my age. He's seen Jimy a few times. He was around Jimy as well. And the drummer I'm using for that gig, James Rouse. We call him Biscuit. He usually plays with Vernon Reed. He's
Wow.
actually a Buddy Miles scholar, and he's actually got an album coming out, tribute to Buddy Miles. So I'm blessed to be with some heavy hitters on this gig. It's as simple as that. This we present Jimi Hendrix. That's why I always say it's the most authentic Hendrix show. This is it. This is if you're into Hendrix or you're trying to find out what he's about, you're gonna want to come see this, because we do things that Jimy wasn't able to do when he was alive. Jimy wasn't able to present both of his shows in one concert. There was some songs we performed live he wasn't able to do live. So you're really seeing what this guy was about when you come see Kiss the Sky.
Well, you're going to be doing probably about a 2-hour show in length, maybe little over, but you'll be recreating some of the different phases of Jimy's career.
Yes, and in between costume changes and things like that, we show videos to set you up for the next set. Interviews, not only with Jimy himself, by the people who work with him, his engineers, and people talking about him, just to get you in line for what's coming up next. That's why I say it's a Broadway play type of a production on a mom and pop budget, but the talent makes this work. That's very important. This is why I've lasted for over 50 years performing a Hendrix show. I've toured the world. I've opened up for some heavy acts. I've only been able to do it because I present Jimy like nobody else.
I could do an excellent job.
Yeah. Come and join us.
Hopefully you'll be back in the area soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward, man. I had a good time hanging with you, man. It was a blast.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you have great staff working with you.
Yeah, I'm very blessed, man. And like I said, we don't have a big budget. I've been doing this for over 50 years. I've defied a few cease and desist orders, countless bans, meaning banning of this act, meaning we're booked somewhere, the next thing you know, it's mysteriously canceled. And, and yeah, just funny little things like that. As I said, this is very dangerous to certain powers that be to present Jimy this way?
Yeah, Jimmy, with the shows that you do, recreate Monterey. There are recordings of Jimy, say at Berkeley, Isle of Wight, in Sweden. Out of all the bootlegs and everything else that are out there, is there one of those concerts that really stands out as this is the defining moment for Jimy? Monterey, one of those shows, or one of the lesser known ones that you may have heard?
Here's what I tell everybody when they ask a similar question or the same question you asked. After Monterey Pop Festival, when Jimy first came on the scene in the United States, it was downhill. He was, and I'm speaking the words of his producer and co-manager back then, Chas Chandler, told me this. Basically, he was never able to reach that peak again. That concert was very important to Jimy because it counted. They had to be good because it really counted. And after that, because of the BS that was going on with the management and everything and things like that, it was downhill. So you had maybe a few sporadic concerts here and there that were really good, but nothing consistent. For instance, when I went to see Grand Funk Railroad, when I went to see Yes, when I went to see Chicago, they were always good. It was consistent, good sound system, good musicianship, everything. I can't say the same with Hendrix. We were talking about Santana. Every time I saw Santana, it was just, spectacular, immaculate sound. Just everything was great. Not with Jimy. And now, of course, you'll get the Jimy heads. Oh yeah, man, Jimi Hendrix was God, man, and he was a great. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being very objective and impartial. Even at a young age, and watching him and knowing that something didn't sound right, something sounded funny. You know what I mean? It didn't sound like with those other acts I mentioned, especially Yes. I used to love to go see Yes. It was like watching, it was like listening to a J.R. Tolkien book,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It took you on a whole nother ride, and plus the LSD and the other stuff I was taking then. But man, it was just the musicianship, everything was just there, man. And I can't say the same for Hendrix. Matter of fact, this was before I even joined the Hendrix fan club. I was at the concert with Sly Stone opened for Hendrix, and Bleu Hendrix, nobody cared when Hendrix came on after Sly. Sly burned the place down. I was there, I saw it. And Jimy was very embarrassed walking out of the place. He knew.
What was the
Sly
cause
ripped
of
the
that?
place apart because Sly had a show back then where basically he'd get everybody to clap their hands. I think it was doing Dance to the Music of Higher. And then they went a cappella. Then Sly would leave the stage and go down the aisle of the Fillmore. And you had the two seat, the two sets of seats, and they had aisle. And then the whole band would follow him, just clapping their hands and singing, "Wanna Get You High," right?
Yeah.
They went out of the Fillmore. This is 2nd Avenue. Everybody, the audience followed them out of the Fillmore. Then Sly made a U-turn and came back in, right? And still clapping. Everybody, "Wanna Take
That's
You
an
Higher."
experience.
Boom, boom, boom. Get up on stage, pick up the instruments. 1, 2, 3. You cannot follow that. I don't care who you are. There is no following that. So when Jimy came on, people were still talking. I mean, he played, the people up front were digging it. People in the back were like talking, and where's Jimi Hendrix? You cannot follow that. I was there. I saw that. You know what I mean? So I'm telling you what went down. But with studying Jimi Hendrix, you have to be impartial. and objective. You got to put aside, oh, Jimi Hendrix is God, or Jimi Hendrix. If you're objective, you'll see he didn't want you. He even said this. He's seen people making his, playing his mistakes, making his mistakes. He didn't want people doing that. And he really cared about his fan club. He had 2 fan clubs, the American and the British. The British fan club was run by a female. They got all of the perks. I mean, posters, if they were t-shirts, I don't know if they're t-shirts back, but anything good they got. We didn't get jack but a button. I mean, basically, so for us to be, every time I was around Jimy, it was 3 or 4 of us from the fan club. He didn't know my name, but he acknowledged us, and boom, 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 boom. And basically, he always, he didn't act stupid and foolish around us. He wanted to set an example. He really took us very seriously. And he's the one who told me about Berkeley. He was very fired up. I think Quincy Jones had told him about the school. He's told us, man, there's a school that's studying jazz, man. It's like, wow, you need to get up. So me and two other guys from performing arts took the test, and I was the only one who made the test that year for Berkeley, but it was because of Hendrix.
Wow. Wow. Well, I really thank you for taking the time.
No, I thank you for even having any interest in Hendrix.
Well, how could I not? You're looking at one of the original hippies.
Yeah, but I'm talking about
days.
What I mean is you have your
music.
own show, and to even want to speak about Hendrix on a spiritual level, because sometimes I bring this up on shows, and as soon as I say anything spiritual, which is what I'm about with Jimy, they shut that right down.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm interested in. That's what I was interested in.
It's great.
And most of my shows somehow or another,
Yes, yeah.
But I appreciate it so much. And it's been lovely meeting you face to face.
I got you, girl.
We have great conversations on the phone. I want to thank my co-host, Mark Eddy. And with that,
thanks for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to meet him and learn all of this stuff. I'm just in awe, of awe of the person and sad at the same time, Wow, it's deep. It's really deep, and I appreciate this. I want to tell my other truthers out there, I'm no longer on the gurn. So if you want to catch me on our Saturday shows, go to my YouTube channel, Ramona Speaks the Other Truth, 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Perhaps I may make them shorter. You guys drop me a line and let me know. And if there's any subjects that you want me to discuss or see about having guests on to talk about, drop me a line and let me know. I try to give you the other side, that which isn't known. And with that, I want to say, enjoy the rest of your evening, and I see you next Saturday.